Good morning and welcome. I hope you can hear me. Is the mic level good? Am I projecting enough you can hear me? Good. Welcome. So if you haven't signed in yet, please do so. This is a little bit of a unique offering for adult education. That this is both an regular Sunday morning adult education hour, and it's also the first in our series of new member classes. So if you're here just because you like coming to adult education, welcome. If you're here for a new member class, welcome as well. Really glad you're here. So we're talking today a little bit of an introduction to our tradition here at St. Matthew's. What is our denomination? The ELCA. That there's kind of an alphabet soup in our denomination. ELCA stands for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that means and what it means to be here. But first, I'm hoping that we all can get to know each other a little bit better. So what I'm going to ask you two questions. I'm not going to have them on the screen, that you can just maybe turn to a group of people, maybe a group of like 2, 3, 4 around you, and share your name. Share if you grew up in a church tradition, what tradition that was, and what's a standout memory from growing up in that tradition. So again, name, tradition you grew up in, and then just a memory from that tradition, if you have a tradition that you grew up in. Let's take maybe like 5 minutes to start and do that. So church, somebody next to you will talk about that.
I'm Natalie, hi. I've been here, just haven't formally joined for about 2 years now. I grew up in an ELCA church in the Madison area. Are you from the Chicago area? Yeah, I've seen your head.
That's where Ronald Reagan was.
Yeah.
Seconds. About 30 seconds more. So you can just kind of wrap up where you're at and come back together. 30 seconds.
Started at kind of in 2 years ago. Yeah, well, yes, I think the last few years have been great for everybody. We're up here.
Okay, let's come back together. We'll have more chances to talk, I promise. I'm glad to see we have such an engaged, willing to participate group. That's going to make today more fun. It's going to make it better, I promise. So really glad to hear about that. So just as a little show of hands, so how many of you were raised in a predecessor, either the ELCA or a predecessor body of the ELCA? Okay, so a lot of long time, what became ELCA Lutherans. How many of you were raised or have a background in a different flavor of Lutheranism than the ELCA? Okay, so kind of Missouri Synod, Wisconsin Synod. Okay, how many of you were raised in a different expression of Christianity that wasn't Lutheran at all?
Methodist.
Same. So a mix of that too. How many of you just wouldn't say you were really raised in the church at all? Okay, so
Except on Easter and Christmas.
Yeah. So there's various flavors. So it sounds like that's cool. We have a variety of backgrounds there. We're eager to talk a little bit more about that as we go. But first, I have a trivia question for you all. I'm curious. And I'll give you the answer in a second. But I'm curious if let's do this maybe Family Feud style. You can just take a guess. We'll do it we'll kind of go this side, that side, take turns. I want to know the 5 countries with the most Lutherans. Maybe let's start with a guess on this side over here. Just
Germany.
Germany. Germany is number 1. That's correct. So you got it right. Let's go to another guess. Where you said, what was the next guess after Germany? Norway? Norway is actually not in the top 5. So let's come over to this side. So what do you think? U.S. correct. So currently the two. So Germany's in the top 5. The U.S. is in the top 5. So let's say on this side again. We're doing Family Feud style. So what's another guess for a top 5 country?
Sweden.
Sweden. Yep. So Germany's 1. Sweden is 4. The U.S. is 5. So take another guess on this side. You have any other guesses? What about Tanzania? Yep, Tanzania is number 3. Yes, Tanzania is number 3. So, any other guesses on this side? Malaysia? It is not Malaysia. No. Let's come over to this side. So there's 1 left. It is number 2. Lithuania. It is not.
Yes.
I honestly don't think you all are going to get it.
Canada.
It's not Canada. It's actually Ethiopia, which has a really interesting history. That Ethiopia is a much more like modern church. Like it has been growing in the last few decades. So it doesn't have even the same like missionary history of a country like Tanzania. And so here's a list. I gave you a little bit longer of a list. Germany is 1. Ethiopia is 2. But you could look, Ethiopia probably in the next few decades is going to catch Germany. It's gaining fast. Tanzania is 3. Sweden is 4, the US is 5. I actually had to do a little bit of math to help you out with here because these are the numbers from the Lutheran World Federation, and both the Missouri Synod and the Wisconsin Synod are not parts of the Lutheran World Federation. So if you just go off the Lutheran World Federation numbers, Indonesia is actually number 5. Then Denmark, and then India. And then India, isn't that interesting? Yeah, so you can see that there's more, that means yes, there are more Lutherans in India than there are in Norway. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people in India. So one of the things I want to point out with here, and if we go down a little bit farther, I think this is it. When I was pulling this together, actually, it just worked out with timing that both here at St. Matthew's and over at Lake Park are both doing a class like this today. And we didn't even know this till last night. When Alyssa, my wife, who's at Lake Park, and I were planning this together, and I was asking her this, and then she was asking, is this on a total number or a per capita basis? And I didn't, so this is just a total number, as you can see, but I think on a per capita basis, the most Lutheran country, I'm pretty sure might be Namibia, which has well over 50% of the country is Lutheran. So that's, I don't know, maybe Sweden is, I know, that's a lot of Swedes in Norway. So the reason I'm going to bring this all up, I want to start by saying these are 3 things that Lutheranism is not. One of them I hope you're already convinced of by just seeing that that Lutheranism is not just a white European faith. So I was raised, going back to the opening question about traditions, I was raised in a nominally Presbyterian church, but I was basically in the evangelical world growing up. And I went to St. Olaf College, which is not only a Lutheran college, but is a Norwegian Lutheran college. And so when I went to, St. Olaf is known for its music, it's known for its beautiful Christmas performance, the Christmas festival. And I remember being at Christmas Fest my freshman year, and all these alums showed up wearing Norwegian sweaters, and then when the hymn singing, that was congregational song, began, everybody knew how to sing in Norwegian too. I was like, is this what it means to be Lutheran? I was like, what? But if you go back and look, that's not even in the top 10. Like that, there's a lot more to Lutheranism than that. There's a lot of Lutherans in the world that go, what is going on at St. Olaf? I'd love to. St. Olaf was an amazing spot, but there's more to, but that is not like the essence of what it means to be a Lutheran. The second thing I want to name is that that Lutheranism is not the same from church to church. As you can probably imagine, from country to country, there's cultural and ethnic differences. And also, even within the ELCA, even within our regional body, which is called the Greater Milwaukee Synod, let me tell you, there are some Spanish language churches that largely have people from El Salvador in them. That's going to look and feel differently. I worked at a church in New York when I was in seminary, and long story short, historically a German largely white church, but ended up after building for a Argentinian Lutheran church got condemned, kind of welcomed them in, and then through a variety of factors, there was a lot of Mexican that began coming to this church. And so I can tell you right now, Mexican Lutherans and Argentinian Lutherans, even to this white guy, are noticeably different. So there are cultural and ethnic differences from church to church. There's also different worship styles. Some are going to be like hymns and organ. Some can have like a guitar and like a rock band. That's all. Though neither one or the other is like purely Lutheran in that way. Then also I want to name that there are differences in the U.S. too. Like particularly, there's going to be differences between denominations. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. The Missouri Synod, the Wisconsin Synod, the ELCA. There are some noticeable differences there, and also within our within the ELCA too, you'll notice some differences too. So it's not the same from church to church. And this photo to go up with that point, to make that same point, was taken in 2017 with the handoff of the head of the Lutheran World Federation, like the global communion for the Lutheran Church. The gentleman on the left was the outgoing president. That's Munib Udan, who is from Palestine, who's an Arab Lutheran. And then I can't remember the gentleman's name on the right, but he is from Nigeria. So you can just see, you can imagine if you went to both their churches, though they both are wearing clerical collars, I bet they're going to look pretty different. And then the third thing I want to say about Lutheranism is Lutheranism is a title that Martin Luther didn't like. So yes, our denomination and our church body is named after Martin Luther, but if he said, what, you go to St. Matthew's Lutheran Church, you'd be like, change that name. There's a couple reasons for that. One, I firmly have the belief that Luther was not trying to start a new church or a new denomination. He was seeking to reform and make changes within the Roman Catholic Church at the time. And honestly, there's been a lot of work done by ecumenists, like people that are trying to create like harmony and agreement between church denominations and church bodies that say, like, for instance, like justification by faith, like saved by grace, like that's not a church dividing issue. But both the Catholics and the Lutherans agree on that now. That's not what divides us. Honestly, it's the rhetoric and 500 years of like resentment and like inertia built up. There are some significant differences between the two. We may get to that later. But I just more wanted to say, Luther, not trying to start a new church, trying to make some changes, from within. And also, that ended up becoming kind of a disparaging title. Oh, you're a Lutheran. You're not following the blood church at the time, the Roman Catholic Church. You're a Lutheran. Luther would have said, no, we're following Jesus. We're Christians. If you want to give us a title now, this is a fraught term now. I'd rather be called an evangelical. That means something now differently than what Luther meant. Evangelical literally means someone committed to the good news. Evangelical means good news, someone proclaiming the gospel. Luther thought that there were church leaders at the time that had deviated from that, and that's what he was seeking to challenge. So the third thing about Lutheranism, it's not a name that its founder even wanted. That Luther wanted to be a part of a larger church, and wanted unity with other Christians, and wanted to, and didn't want to inherently be splintering off from everyone else. Different Lutherans might interpret him differently at that point. I think I'm right here, though. I think that may actually be a difference you'll notice probably between the ELCA and then maybe other expressions of Lutheranism as well. And so now I'm curious. Those are three framing things that Lutheranism is not. Lutheranism is not the same everywhere you go. Lutheranism is not just for white people of European descent or in Europe. And then Lutheranism isn't trying to be different than everybody else. Lutheranism is wanting to remind us of the saving gospel of Jesus Christ. Though that's really what Lutheran, at the heart of where Luther came and Lutheranism is coming from. So I'm curious now, I want you to turn to people around you. Maybe same group, maybe different group. And just take a minute or two and say, when you think of Lutheranism, what comes to mind? Lutheranism is fill in the blank. Turn to those around you, take a stab at that. What do you think? Go talk to those around you.
I know.
We're not going to get in your face. We're not going to get in your face. That's what it is to me. That's one thing.
People were building roads connected to a community and traditions of that community. Probably more narrow than that. It's probably a bit broad,
Do you have a good answer on what Lutheranism is? Is that? Oh, okay,
So small catechism is what I
Yeah, the sacraments were like that too. A scholar during the 1500s.
Where was he a pastor?
People don't understand that.
Did you say that you, I couldn't see the answer, is that you grew up in a different Methodist? Okay.
So growing up, I always asked my mom what's the difference between like Lutheranism and there was the question was like, what's the Methodist? And she said 2 blocks. Because when growing up, the churches were all kind of like this in the same general area. And you know, we did in our congregation, whatever, the high school player, we got to visit some of the other churches on the area, all I don't know, growing up, I understood catechism, the reasons for it, it's different than yours, but really it's just a tradition, it's a different expression of Christianity, it's just another tradition.
It's so many times similar. I haven't gone to a lot of other churches, and there's a lot of things that
a while ago, I don't remember how long ago it was, but the church programs.
So let's come back together as our group. I'm curious what we talked about. Let's come back together. What are some things that came up? Lutheranism is ... Grace. Yes, grace. What else do we? Welcoming. Inclusive. Awesome. Thank you. What else do we say that?
The loving God.
Loving God. Yeah.
A brand.
Brand. Yeah. Interesting.
Bible. Based on the Bible.
Based on the Bible. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's a tradition of Christianity. It's one of the many Christian traditions and identities.
Absolutely. That's great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a couple things that I would say are kind of essential to defining what Lutheranism is. And I think we can all agree Lutheranism is a form, an expression, a tradition, a flavor, whatever you want to call it, of Christianity. And so that's just, and also, since it's not just like a white or European thing, I'm going to give more of a theological definition, some things that are essential to what defines Lutheranism in terms of belief. And don't just take that as a given. So for instance, the Episcopal Church, the term Episcopal is related to like the episcopate, a bishop. And so what the Episcopalians understand their church being constituted by apostolic succession, by this belief that the apostles that met Jesus, they then shared the story with the next round of apostles, who shared it with the next, who shared it with the next, who shared it with the next. So there's this line of sharing who Jesus is, going back to the time of Jesus through the bishops. So there's a church structure that's essential to what it means to be Episcopalian. That's not the same thing in the Lutheran tradition. Couple things. Yeah.
In this country.
In this country, but there's nowhere in the world where Lutherans say that is an essential attribute to being Lutheran. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you. So maybe there are some expressions of Lutheranism that would see that as a more constitutive aspect of what it means to be Lutheran. A couple key tenets of what it means to be Lutheran. One, this is a Latin term, sola scriptura, which the idea, what we're talking about, the Bible matters. The Bible, to use the words of the early Lutherans, was the Bible is the norming norm. So this is like, where does our faith emerge from? It emerges from the Bible. And interpreting the Bible and trying to wrestle with that. And this is the Bible as opposed to, for instance, tradition of this is how we've always done it. This is what's been passed down from the past. Each and any one of us can read the Bible and can appeal to that to understanding our faith. The next, grace. We're ultimately saved by grace, by God's love. We don't earn God's favor. God loves us freely, and so that's we don't have to worry about ourselves because God loves us. So grace allows us to care about others in our world because between us and God, we're all good through God's favor. And now this next one, this is something that will distinguish us. When I said between the Catholics, when I said previously, like for instance, church dividing issue, not about grace. That there's some fine print there. Really, the next one, priesthood of all believers, is more of a church dividing issue. In that Lutherans believe that all are called by God, not just the priests. God has given us a calling and a task to do something in the world. That is a faithful expression of our lives of faith. Everyone. And also, everyone is equal before God. God doesn't prefer or see being a pastor or a priest or an ordained person is superior to being a doctor or a lawyer or a salesman or a, insert whatever you want there. That is something that's essential about what it means to be Lutheran. The next thing is that we believe that, like for instance, in communion, God is really present there. Jesus says, "This is my body," and we take him at his word. There are, for instance, some of the more reformed expressions of church. That's probably, you're going to see a lot of like Presbyterians, maybe certain expressions of like Baptists, things that sort, may hedge on that. I can remember being at one of my wife's friend's wedding, and my wife hates that I tell this story, but I'm going to tell it anyways, that they had communion in their wedding, and then the person that was officiating over communion said, was reading the words of the institution, and this man said, and I quote, "Jesus said, 'This is a symbol of my body. This is a symbol of my blood.'" That's not what's in the Bible. Jesus didn't say it's a symbol. Jesus said, "This is my body." And so that's not just, I'm not making this as a point about what is happening just in church. It's a more broad point, that we believe that God isn't, and Jesus isn't someone that's just taken a step back after the incarnation and just said, "Go figure it out yourselves." We believe that God is with us and present and around us in the world. And God is active and at work and with us still. We believe that Jesus and God are really present. Then also, the theology of the cross. If you want to understand something about Jesus, look to what Jesus did on the cross. That God isn't just in the happy moments, in the moments of victory and triumph, but God can also be revealed in suffering and in hardship. And it's not just that God isn't just present when things are good, but also when things can be hard too. There's a lot more to be said about that. There have been many long books written about that. That's just a quick gloss. These are a couple of the essential attributes of what it means to be Lutheran. And I would contend pretty much every Lutheran is going to, regardless of tradition or nationality, are going to agree on these sorts of points, or I would contend should agree. But there are also some real differences too. So within the United States, there are a number of church bodies about what it means to be Lutheran. And there are more than just 3, but I'm going to the 2 largest ones that you're probably most familiar with are the Wisconsin Synod WELS or the Missouri Synod LCMS. There's a couple other splinter bodies that that split off from point 1 I'll get to in a second. And so to this first point, a number of people said, welcoming, inclusive, things of that sort. I would contend that in my understanding of Lutheranism, we're going back, that we're saved by grace through faith, that we're loved by God, no fine print. Then it's not the church's job to then add fine print to that. It's supposed to say, you're welcome, God loves you, full stop. There are some other expressions of Lutheranism that I would contend probably seek out a little more fine print to that. There's, for instance, like a key difference between the ELCA and the other expressions of Lutheranism in the United States is that the ELCA is committed to LGBTQIA+ inclusion. That regardless of who you love, whatever gender you identify as, there's a space for you in God's table in the ELCA. I'm going to also add, though, remember I said things are different from church to church. Some ELCA churches are farther along on this than others, but I would say that as a denomination, that's a commitment. And then also another difference here, this right here, that's our denomination's presiding bishop. As you can tell, she is a woman. That wouldn't happen in the Missouri Synod or in Wells. My wife is a pastor. That can't happen in Wisconsin Synod or the Missouri Synod. Just in practice, a notable difference between the ELCA and the other largest church bodies that are Lutheran in the U.S. Are the willingness to ordain women and LGBTQIA+ individuals. That is in practice, a key difference. And I'm going to actually bounce ahead to the third one, because I think that'll kind of point to this a little bit too, that a key difference also is around ecumenical relationships. Remember how I brought up earlier that I had to do some math to move the ELCA up, the US up above Indonesia, because the Missouri Synod, the Wisconsin Synod are not a part of the Lutheran World Federation. There is less ecumenical work that's done. That there really isn't any. That the ELCA has partnerships that you officially, if somebody is a member next door at the Methodist Church, they can come have communion here. Or even technically, I could serve as a pastor at a Methodist church. Doesn't happen in practice much, but I could. Like the Methodists, the Presbyterians, the Episcopalians, there's a couple others. So you just kind of get that idea. That just doesn't happen in the Missouri Synod. So that, and the Wisconsin Synod. That's just a difference, is that the ELCA is more committed to working with other church bodies. I would contend one of the key differences you'll see about this, or reasons for this, I'm going to give a little bit of a history lesson here. Germany is actually a newer country than the United States. Germany, as we know it, was founded in the mid-19th century, or the idea of Germany. And previously there was Saxony and Bavaria and a couple of other regions like that. Where was that? Prussia, there you go. So there's a number of them. And so one of the ways that the leaders of this newly formed Germany wanted to create unity between this new idea of Germany was to unite the various regional Protestant church bodies. And so they were going to end up being a German Catholics and then just German Protestants. And that meant that for some people in Germany, that meant you were coming from a Lutheran background. For others, you would have been coming from a more Calvinist background. Some Germans were fine with that. Some German Lutherans were not. They were like, you know what, I would rather move to St. Louis and be a Lutheran by myself than live in Germany. Now that's literally what happened. And so there is a history there of wanting seeing that being Lutheran stands against other expressions of Christianity. And so there's this inertia there and this residue built up of kind of wanting to be left alone. That's the same reason why you'll see that a lot of Missouri Synod and then also Wisconsin Synod Lutheran churches have schools with them. They want to kind of be able to educate their kids on their own, kind of stay in-house. There's never really been a history of Lutheran schools in the ELCA predecessor bodies. There's a little bit of fine print there, but I'd say big picture, the ELCA is more open to being involved and mixed into society. There's a couple reasons for that. One is there weren't that Calvinist Lutheran tension in countries like Sweden and Norway and Finland and Denmark, because if you were Protestant, you were just Lutheran. And then the Germans that became the ELCA maybe were a little bit less caught up on that point. So that's going to be another key difference in practice, is that the ELCA is more eager to partner with others. And then finally, another key difference is I would say every expression of Lutheranism sees the Bible as the essential norm of our faith. But what we do with the Bible and how we interpret that is different from Lutheran expression to Lutheran expression. So for instance, I'll give you an example. At the very beginning of the Bible, it says that God created over 7 days. Lutherans are more inclined to say, you know what, as I read this, and you read it in Hebrew and look at it, this sounds a lot like poetry. Because guess what? It is poetry. And sometimes poetry can use allegorical meaning and can be saying that what's literally said, there's a deeper, richer meaning than that. So maybe that's what this creation story is about. This creation story says something about God and the world that God created, but it's not inherently trying to describe scientific fact. It's not saying, okay, took God 7 days and this is the order God created things. That's, I'd say, a more ELCA Lutheran way of reading the Bible. Some of the more conservative expressions of Lutheranism says, the Bible says it was created in 7 days. It was created in 7 days. So that it's not like one takes the Bible seriously, one doesn't take the Bible seriously. It's just different willingness, different ways to read the Bible. And I might just add, too, that these disagreements aren't somehow that like the ELCA Lutherans fell away from the tradition of how things like used to be. If you go read the early church theologians from like the 3rd and 4th century, they were observing the same things that the ELCA, like ways of thinking observed. I would contend a lot of the differences, like with the Wisconsin Synod and the Missouri Synod, are more of a reaction to like modernity. It's more like, oh no, Darwin came along. We need to push back against that. It's a more modern reaction than inherently representative of what the Christian tradition has been for thousands of years, or even what Luther was talking about at the time. Luther was all about oracle reading, for instance. So that's another difference there. And then I would just also add that with like the ecumenical relationships, Carl brought up earlier how that, for instance, in Sweden, having apostolic succession matters more. One reason for that, again, is because when, after Martin Luther came along, everybody in Sweden, including all the bishops, moved from being Catholic to being Lutheran. So there is a line there, and that there wasn't really a contested nature. Are you Catholic? Are you Protestant? What kind of Protestant? You're just Lutheran there. And so as a result, there isn't that tension with other expressions of Lutheranism in, for instance, Swedish Lutherans, and that's going to be something that expresses in a more open posture today in the descendants of those Swedish immigrants to the United States, which are in the ELCA for the most part. That was a lot of information. I'm trying to both give you a fairly balanced view, while also kind of saying where I stand at the same time on these things. These are, I would say, are things that, regardless of whatever Lutheran expression in the U.S. are on, you would note these are three of the key differences. The differences would be value judgments over those three things. I feel good about where the ELCA stands, and given by what some of you said, I hope you're in the same spot. So we've gone from Lutheranism in the world to Lutheranism in the United States, and next I want to pivot to talking about Lutheranism here at St. Matthew's. So I'm going to have you turn to the people around you for a sec, because all of you at some point started coming to St. Matthew's. And so I'm curious, what brought you to St. Matthew's? Why St. Matthew's? And then also, what's the hope for St. Matthew's as we go into the future? Turn and talk to the people around you about those two questions, a little bit about what your hopes are for St. Matthew's and what brought you to St. Matthew's. What do you love most about St. Matthew's? Take 3 or 4 minutes to talk about that.
Very good. I first came to St. Matthew's once I realized I was in the Milwaukee area permanently and I was not going to go back home or back to where I wanted to find a large congregation. I felt so welcome, and I think that was just people I could relate to. I just did not live house. I live in Elm Grove, it's not far, but I wanted a place where I felt welcome and my kids could
We were at a Methodist church.
Part of it was that you said actually I feel like they resonate with which was
How long have you been a member of St. Matthew's? Are you coming? Okay. You've been here a while.
But really, it was really the music that brought us. We joined the choir before we joined the church.
Okay.
There's an awful lot going on.
What about yourself? What brought you here? Okay, long time. So you two are probably pretty compatible as far as length of time here. How long when did you
The kids all meet there.
And what brought you here?
I'll sit and read and watch people come down. They come down to Center Ave. We usually sit out to one side. And watch people come down to the house. There's a kid elementary school. There's so many. It used to be when they
What about hopes for the future?
That's my impression.
It's almost up to what before the pandemic.
It's nice to see that. Wonderful, right. Period of transition. Yeah, I think that certainly would be my hope if we can continue to grow, survive, and instruments to change in schools. And we know more people are going to be looking at church and faith in a different way. And I hope that we can continue to serve different people in different ways and meet people where they are and what they need. There's so many good things that you don't want people to be scared away, like, oh, I joined in a church and that's all. You know, you want to be able to have it in different people's welcoming. Welcoming, I like that. Any hopes for you? Say that to you?
second and third grade, so I want to get them more involved. They're taking Sunday school for the past 2 years.
Okay, so let's finish up our conversation, wrap up where we're at, come back together in about 15 seconds.
Did official eventually. She's sort of
Okay, so let's come back together.
Within the context.
This first question now. Why St. Matthew's? What brought us to St. Matthew's? Maybe it was my mom and dad went here. Maybe it was, maybe it's something that was more of a personal choice. So what are some things that brought us to St. Matthew's?
Music.
Music. Yeah, great music here. else?
There was a schism at our church, and we heard about St. Matthew's, and I came through the store. Pastor Kinnons was the pastor at that time. I didn't know where to go. I said, "Show me the way."
Great, thank you. So just feeling kind of welcomed when you came, and also coming from a church that there was a schism and some conflict there. And so what else brought us to St. Matthew's?
Book club.
A
Book club.
support, it supports it, we feel it's very supported here.
Good feeling supported. Book club, yeah, thank you. What else brought you to St. Matthew's?
7:30 service.
7:30 service.
My wife worked every other weekend, and I said, they got 7:30 service. I would have the rest of my day free.
Service time that fits with our schedule. I totally get it. Yeah, definitely a thing. Yeah.
I just got fed up with the Missouri Synod. I walked out one day and I said, I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah. So just like Missouri Synod wasn't working. Yeah. Thank you.
Not for me, a poor woman.
Yeah. Yeah. That's. I think it's something that that St. Matthew's and I think the ELHCA should continue to commit to, regardless of what gender you are. You're welcome and valued, as a member of the body of Christ. Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
And because she wanted to get out of there, I started coming here, and I opened my eyes into some things that I had to reevaluate, thinking, and that's why I'm here now, and that's why I want to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Your Sunday school for children, our grandchildren are here. And the music program for children. I'm trying to get my daughter to commit to church through Missouri Synod, and she kind of left, so the grandchildren are the hook.
Absolutely. The kids is a good spot for kids. You know what? That excites me too. I got a little one. She's with her mom today because my wife's also a pastor, and we take turns with her. So but I'm definitely excited to be a good spot to raise my kids here too. Yeah, so good spot for kids. Yeah. What are some other things we talked about?
I think we just, similar to what we've heard, felt welcoming, and so many different opportunities for so many different types of people, whether it's the youth or the music or the book club or all the different things that we're here to offer. Very vibrant congregation and ways to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I grew up around here, and like all of my peers that I really respected, like coming here.
Thank you.
What's nice too is that during like test time or whatever, kids from Wauwatosa East can come over here and study together, and I think that brings people in.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. It's a spot, brings people in, let high schoolers from across the street study here. Thank you. Yeah.
I started coming here after COVID, when everything had shut down and then reopened. The church I had been attending, I felt, lost its reverence. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
And lost its grounding, and it just wasn't a fit anymore. And I felt grounded here.
Good. Yeah. The pandemic shifted a lot in our society and in church, and sometimes just finding a better fit afterwards makes complete sense. Thank you. So I really appreciate you sharing all these things. When we're talking, these are all pointing at various strengths and aspects of what it means to be St. Matthew's. I don't really want to stand up here and say, here are the 3 principles I've decided are what's most important to St. Matthew's. We as a group are determining and speaking up what are some of the strengths and the essence of St. Matthew's. We're a Lutheran church that welcomes people, that is involved in our community, that has good music and remains reverent, that forms people that we want to be like, that is a good spot when another church isn't quite working. These are all various things that are defining of what it means to be St. Matthew's.
Is that what brought you to St. Matthew's?
No, really, it's a great question. So I'll tell a little bit of my story right now. I'll happily share more over time. I live in Wauwatosa. I've lived in Wauwatosa now for about 3 years. I moved to Wauwatosa with my wife because we wanted to live in between the 2 churches that we had previous that I worked at and served at, and then where my wife is at. She's on the east side, kind of near UWM. And I was in Muskego, and so Wauwatosa was kind of in between the two, so we kind of share the commute. But just by living in Wauwatosa for a couple of years and just being involved in our regional body, I had grown to really appreciate what St. Matthew's was about, and also increasingly love the idea of being able to know that when my daughter gets to school age, she's 16 months now, she needs to learn how to talk in sentences. But that she could recognize the same kids at school and at church. That really drew me, and so it was a lot of things about St. Matthew's that felt like a really good fit. I wouldn't say I was leaving a church that I had issues with. It's like some of you saying, well, this other church wasn't working for me. I was at a church called Atonement in Muskego that I loved and still really love the people there. I just knew that, after me having served there for 6 years, there had been some other pastoral transitions, that it was good for Atonement to have kind of a little bit of a clean slate, and it was good for me to have it was my time to move on to something else. So I wasn't coming from a church that I had any problems with. It was just strictly being drawn to some of the things that you've been bringing up about St. Matthew's that I really loved. So that's a little bit about me and why. I also want to share a little bit of history of St. Matthew's in the name, that if you look, I am all but positive on this, so if some of you know the history of St. Matthew's better than I do, feel free to correct me. But if you look in our denomination, the standard naming convention in our denomination is something like St. Matthew's Lutheran Church. There's no rule on that, but that's often what they tend to be. I came from a congregation named Atonement Lutheran Church. My wife serves at a church called Lake Park Lutheran Church. St. Matthew's official name is St. Matthew's Evangelical Lutheran Church. There are very few ELC churches that have ELC and that have evangelical in the title. But there are a lot of Wisconsin Synod and Missouri Synod churches that have that naming convention. So St. Matthew's is unique in that I didn't look through the whole list. I'm not sure if there's another ELC church in our regional body that has evangelical in the title. Is there?
St. Luke's in Greendale.
St. Luke's in Greendale, so there's not a lot.
I would know that.
Because you served there, yeah.
30 years ago, 100% did.
Yeah.
And it was a big battle on that issue. I was at the convention to include evangelical as what do they call the Lutherans in Germany, the Evangelische.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I think that term has been stolen by the political movements of our country.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's hard to reclaim it without a lot of baggage.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so I think that is thank you, Carl. That is a significant part of this, that when St. Matthew's was founded in 1920, evangelical meant something different than now.
Exactly.
It's a fraught term now. And I think that there's been some distancing from ELC Lutherans over that. But another part of it, too, I would add, if you go look, that St. Matthew's was an offshoot from St. John's in Wauwatosa. St. John's, just over the river, is Wisconsin Synod. And St. Matthew's was founded by a group of people that wanted to have an English language service. And this is after World War I. It's founded in 1920. That this is a time when that anti-German hostility had risen and bigotry, frankly, anti-German bigotry was present in our country. And there was a group of people that said, hey, we would rather be more incorporated into American life as opposed to feeling like we're kind of set apart and doing our own thing. And so St. Matthew's wasn't founded as a Wisconsin Synod church, but it came out of a Wisconsin Synod church. I suspect that evangelical name has something to do with that. And so just from its very founding, St. Matthew's is a church with a tradition to it and a church that wants to be involved in the community and not set apart. That is, from its very founding, that's a part of what St. Matthew's is. as well. And you kind of can point that out too. So St. Matthew's, when it was founded, was a part of what became a predecessor body to the predecessor body of the ELCA called the United Lutheran Church in America, the ULCA. So that's a little bit about St. Matthew's. Now I'm curious, are there some, hopes for St. Matthew's? I'd love to get to that more later. I was hoping to have a chance for people to mingle and introduce themselves, but we've had so much fun talking that what I want to do instead, for the last official 5 minutes, we can go as long as we want, to maybe turn to somebody that you haven't talked to yet, meet somebody new, and then talk about these questions. Both, you don't have to get to all of them. Like, what are some learnings? What are some ongoing questions? So, like, what have we discussed that speaks most profoundly to you? What have we talked about that resonates with your understanding of the Christian faith or challenges you in a new way? Not sure why I have a quotation mark there, ignore that. So what resonates with you? And then also, what's a question that's emerged for you today? Like, what is something you want to talk about more? Don't have to get to all those. Talk about a question or two in there with those around you. Maybe someone you haven't met yet. Say your name and talk a little bit about things you're walking away with today. And there's not going to be like a formal ending time. This is like my way of saying, Sue, you have something to say?
I have a formal ending statement.
So come up here so we can make sure everybody can hear you with the mic, and so online can hear you.
Yeah, this is all fresh and new. This is the first time we're doing adult education with new members, and I think it worked out great. I think it gave our new members a chance to connect with some of the members of our church right away, which is awesome. Thanks for being here, new members and members. Thank you for taking the time to come and be part of this experiment today. Our next class, all I wanted to do is bring our next class to your attention for new members. It'll be 2 weeks from today on the 21st. Thank you. And location I don't know yet. So in the email that I send you, I will let you know what the room location is. We'll definitely do a tour. We'll get more into some of these questions. We'll talk about spiritual gifts and serving. So we have this lovely umbrella conversation that Pastor Kevin started today, and then let's get deeper into what is St. Matthew's all about, how can you connect with others here and with your faith, and how can we join you on your faith journey. So that's what we'll talk about in 2 weeks, and hopefully squeeze in a little tour also.
Are all these going to be, the new member things, all going to be open to everybody?
Well, yeah, you can come next time. Yeah, for sure.
Could you have the new people stand for a sec?
How do you feel about that, new people?
Hey.
I'm